Welcome back, everybody, to Healing You with Gloria Lybecker, your beautiful co-host who is across from me today. As usual, I'm your co-host, Anna Levin, and today we're talking about the ripples of neglect, a very, very broad subject, as we can sense from just the word neglect itself. It's a beautiful, big word. So let's start to deconstruct, a little bit of how do we identify, what neglect is?
Well, it can be very subtle, and it's very conditioned with the individual that experiences it. But on the broad categories, there's mental abuse, there's mental neglect, emotional neglect, there can be spiritual neglect, and then there's also the physical neglect. And so it can happen on many levels and different layers of it. Mm-hmm. And it can go quite unnoticed in society because it usually happens only behind closed doors. And then the people that experience it are conditioned never to reveal it. Right. And so I've come across a lot of different types of that. And for each individual, it can be so unique.
Yes.
Depending on what their environment was like.
And is it true that, because you got me thinking, because the obvious cases, of course, we know, right? It's like the kid, the child whose needs are not met, the basic needs, that's neglect, or not acknowledging someone's emotional needs, that's neglect. But what happens, is this because I heard you say this is an individualized thing, right? Yeah. So is it possible that is also neglect it's an personal experience, an interpretation? Perhaps, they have beautiful, loving parents, but the person feels neglected. Is this possible, or?
Well, the story might be that they've been told often enough, you should be so grateful that you have such a loving family. Mm-hmm. You have all of your needs met. And they're told this repeatedly to where they're thinking, well, this must be true. Then why do I feel odd, or why do I feel different? And why do I not feel like I can speak up? Or why do I have a hard time looking at people? I mean, there are many different ways that it can show up, but it's learned behavior. So they're groomed. Even if they're not conscious of it, they're groomed from a very young age many times, or from the beginning of a relationship, so it can come in quite subtly, but it's really quite stark and deep. And
so people usually feel when they grow up and they have been neglected in one way or another, they feel like they don't have a voice, right? They cannot express.
Sometimes, but they don't know they're neglected. They actually can believe that this is the way it is for everybody.
Right.
And then they look out at other people and they might wonder or they might believe, oh, they have a perfect life. Everybody else's life is perfect. Mm-hmm. And they don't know why. They don't know how to connect with people, or they don't know how to show up. Or maybe, because there can be neglect in really wealthy families too. Mm-hmm. And that's usually the emotional or the mental. It's not so much the physical that can be seen. And I've heard people say that they wish they had cigarette burns on them, or they had some kind of a physical thing, so that there would be understanding and compassion for them. Right. Because it's not obvious.
Yes.
And
yes.
And when they show up differently, then people around them can also feel really uncomfortable because they don't know how to engage with them.
Yes. So what are some of the signs that somebody, for example, that grows up and they have been neglected, and they sense something is off in them, they're having a hard time connecting with people. So what are some of the signs that they can look for in their behavior?
Well, not knowing how to have a conversation with somebody, needing some kind of a script or something. Not knowing how to modulate their own emotions. When some people have had emotional neglect, then they either just kind of cut off from their body and their emotions, or they just don't know how to not have their emotions, and they don't even know that people are watching them. So they can go into, because we're born with all of our distress circuitry, our right hemisphere is on board so that we can have distress signals to get the care we need.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody didn't get the care they needed, then their distress signals just keep going off.
Wow.
And they might not even know that's not typical.
Right.
So that they could show up where they just can't stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
And then people around them are like, well, that's just the way that person is. Just give them enough time. They'll get over it, you know. But nobody knows how to actually accompany them, or so they don't know how to self-soothe.
Right.
Because the infants are not able to self-soothe.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have the care of another being to have that internal regulations, because all regulation comes from co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So if they've been neglected, they're going to miss out on all those co-regulation experiences. And they're either going to shut off completely, or they're going to just be explosive. It could be a direction or somewhere in between.
So what I hear you say is that when we learn from our caregivers and when we have neglect, what we have learned is that we haven't learned. Like that's pretty much, there is a lack there of learning.
Yeah, and so there can be lagging skills in many, many different ways. And neglect actually affects the way that we grow and develop. Mm. So if you, anybody could Google it, look at does it look like this part of the human brain, not the whole sense of self, but it's shrunken. It doesn't have the nurturance to actually grow and make the connections that it needs to. Yeah. So on the U curve of attachment, that neglect can be way far down. It goes into disorganization. Mm-hmm. And
in the physical manifestation, like in the physical space, right? Like this, or is the
space?
Oh, in the internal space.
Disorganization is maybe someone's talking and they're sharing a story, and then all of a sudden they're talking about a different story, and then it relates into this story, and so there's a they don't track and they don't stay on topic, and they don't know it.
That's fascinating to me, because we have met, most of us have met one or two people that are like that, and you often feel like, well, maybe they're just rude, or maybe they don't have social cues, which they don't, but we never think, oh my gosh, maybe this person has experienced neglect, early on, and they never learned.
Or maybe it could be that they haven't developed discernment or discretion. And so then they could be on that opposite end, and they think that if you talk to them and smile that you're a good friend, and then they'll start telling you everything about themselves, And so there's like a flood of information.
So neglect really affects not only the emotional body, but the mental body largely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It affects your whole sense of self. How do you get to know yourself if you haven't been accompanied?
Right.
So you learn the behavior that in whatever your environment is permissible, and you learn it really well. So structure can be really important if that's that person's experience. And then again, on the other side, with the emotional experience, they can feel really invisible. Like they can have like, oh, this is my public self. I need to be my public self now. I need to look nice. I need to look good. I'm representing family.
Yes.
And then in the family, they disappear.
Oh gosh.
Attention to them.
Right.
And it's confusing.
Yes.
And there's no one to talk to find out what to do. Or how to, and so they just have their own internal dialogue. Mm-hmm. And
so once somebody identifies, this in themselves, first of all, is it possible that people can identify this in themselves, this type of behavior, or this type of like, oh, I'm not fitting in, or I'm different, it's missing something.
I'm curious about it, but the word neglect it's a big umbrella, and it covers all of life. So there can be just different facets of life when you realize that there was neglect. And it could be because there's generational neglect. Maybe this has just been passed on down, know. And the parents may have done the best they could, but because they didn't receive what they needed, they don't even know that their child needs it.
Right. Yeah, and you cannot give. I am a firm believer that sometimes, not always, but sometimes you cannot give what you don't know. If it wasn't given to you, then how are you supposed to know how to give it unless you recognize it in yourself and you interrupt the pattern, and then you can change the right
Well,
the line.
yeah. Well, because as human beings, we are very neuroplastic.
Hmm.
We can grow the pathways, and yet it's not a quick fix. So it's really important to have warm accompaniment that can understand you and can read the body's information too, all the communication that comes non-verbally.
Yes.
And it's that they need the neuroception of safety. They need to just feel that it's safe, which many times they don't even know how to recognize emotions because they haven't had anyone to help them learn that.
Hmm.
Um,
It's like so sad to me that, I mean, but this happens, and this is why it's important to have these conversations so that people can actually identify things that, they might not even have thought about before. And there's no shame, and it's okay. It's all okay. And whatever level, like you said, is a huge umbrella. Sometimes some of us, have had it in a marriage, or and some other people have had it growing up as a child, and so you never know and I had very loving parents, so you never know when you're going to experience it, but it's important to have the tools to recognize it.
yeah, or to begin to understand that it's even there, right? So I know as a facilitator where I can have groups that are there, the importance of being really transparent and being able to even name what I'm experiencing and then checking in with a client. I'm wondering if that has meaning for you, because I
Hmm.
can pick up on what's happening for them and then I can reflect it back.
Yes.
And also working with my horses. My horses can do this with people really well. And so
Hmm.
that and then they also are like the amplifiers. So they help the person to begin to feel something that maybe they've never felt.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love your horses.
Yeah.
I want to come visit you. I always tell you this. I will one day, because I think they're magical, and animals are just, they really help us feel. And I think what happens when we experience neglect, one of the ripples, right, that we're talking about, that's one of the huge life-changing ripples, right? The inability to truly feel for whatever reason, because we feel ashamed, because we don't know, we don't have that pathway, because we think that it's normal not to feel, when in reality it's the opposite, right?
Right. And so they can even have trouble with learning because their nervous system their sympathetic activation is on all the time. They're flooded with cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to even be able to start to take in information and to make sense of it, especially if they don't have someone to communicate with, it makes it a much longer path.
Yes.
And so they many times don't know how to act unless they've been taught how to act in certain
Yes.
situations.
Uh-huh.
And then if they are away from that, because the structure that they grew up in is familiar, then they mistake that for safety.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than it actually being safe, it's just familiar.
Yes. Oh, that's huge. Did you guys hear that? It's like is familiar and safe is different. It's not always the same. It could be the same, but
It
it's not
could be
always.
the same, but it's not always the same.
Yeah.
And so also they can feel really stuck or blocked. I've heard them use the phrase of, I've lost all my words. So they can feel like they go blank inside.
Yes. Oh gosh. Okay, so I feel like I'm having a session with you right now, because this, like, a lot of these effects is like me as a kid. Not because my parents were horrible. It's just my mother left. My mom left when I was a
Yeah.
toddler. And so that neglect, I mean, I remember having
That
issues
was a
with
huge loss.
processing information in school, thinking like, oh my gosh, I know I'm smart, like, but I feel stupid because my brain
Right.
just couldn't process things.
That is exactly. So they'll think they're dumb, or they'll think they're left out. And
Yeah.
the perception is that they just don't matter or belong anywhere. They're alone. They live
Yeah.
in a little sea of isolation.
Yeah. So once we identify these effects, like how do we start healing them and turning them around? It's possible, right? Because of the
Yeah.
neuroplasticity and
Yeah. So it's by repeatedly getting to begin to have an exchange with another being,
Mhm.
and developing the capacity for your social engagement system to be built. For many, it's building it for the first time because they didn't build it the first time around.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that it's not there, because we are born with it. It
Right.
just went dormant, so to speak. And so it can
Yes.
be built with warmth and resonance.
Yes.
So it's a felt sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's why I hope that everybody that is listening to our show today, that they really reach out to you, because when we have the courage to actually love ourselves as adults, because it's okay, whatever has happened to us and whatever we have experienced is all okay, and it's never too late. It's never too late. And to have somebody like you, Gloria, that you can, hold our hands while we go through that process, which is very vulnerable, and to reach out. I can tell you from experience, reaching out for help and sometimes feeling inadequate, or like I should know better. I'm an adult. Like, what am I doing? You feel like insecure. It means the world. It means the world to be in a safe, loving, environment with somebody that actually knows what she's talking about.
Well, it's like what you were just mentioning about how the way that someone can feel inside, and then what is the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be an adult, and I feel really little. But to know that that's all right, and for many humans that have experienced neglect, they actually need to give themselves permission, or be given permission, to allow themselves to receive as if they were little.
Yes.
So some therapists do what they call holding therapy. And the way that I use that in sessions with a client can be, it's very tender. Make it very safe. There can be some, actually, there's some beautiful music out there that is actually healing frequencies, and that can be playing gently in the room. You can have soft lights, fuzzy warm blankets, pillows, things that bring comfort.
Yes.
I use therapy swings for people too, that'll give them a hug. But to actually hold them, embrace them as they're a little child, and rock
Yes.
and hum to them. I
Yeah.
mean, those are building blocks for
Yes.
life.
Yes.
To actually feel safe enough to allow yourself to receive that as an adult that didn't receive it,
Mm-hmm.
and many things can start to make connections within.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that it's never too late. And I love that it's, we can still have our own life experience and continue to love ourselves, and explore new avenues of getting ahead of these ripples, the ripple effects of neglect. And it gives me a lot of hope, in my heart, and for everybody else that has gone through neglect, which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you talk about the ripples, and if you think about it as like an ocean, that it has waves, rather than judging the waves by how good or bad they are, learning how to ride the waves, to
Yes.
notice the wave, and to actually begin to acknowledge what it's like to experience that wave. Because until those experiences are held with resonance
Mm-hmm.
rather than judged, they will continue to resurface. And
Yes.
so, and as it's become safe, then other parts of their experience can begin to emerge, and you want to be able to not be in a hurry with it, so they
Right.
don't become flooded by their experience.
Yes.
So that there's a gentle acceptance and curiosity, and a meeting right where they are. So
Yes.
sometimes, I love doing sessions outside, even without the horses, because there's trees and there's grass and there's natural wildlife, right?
Yes.
And to be able to sit on Mother Earth and receive the electromagnetic field can be so healing in and of
Yes.
itself.
Oh gosh, yes, yes. I think it's important for all of us to remember that just because we experience neglect doesn't mean that we have to neglect ourselves as adults, because remember that learned behavior, and that's how we start to break away from that, and we start to heal, and we start to reach out to, beautiful practitioners like yourself that can help us actually get past that and really change our lives. I can talk to you for hours, Gloria. This is like fascinating. It's a dear chapter episode for me, because, I have lived it personally, and I know the importance, and I know that it's possible to be my own adult and my little girl all at the same time, and it's fantastic. I mean, to be able to be all of that as an adult.
And we can develop that compassionate adult inside of ourselves when we've experienced it with another being.
Yes.
Because we need that mental model that we can embody, that can accompany us wherever we go.
Yes, this is true, you guys, because I can tell you, I mean, it took me like 10 years to ask for help. And guess what? The minute I asked for help, I mean, everything was aligned. The right people came into my life. The right books came into my life. The right, courses, whatever I had to do to get healed and learn, it just all came. All we have to do is have the courage to reach out. So in that vein, like, how do people reach out to you, Gloria?
Oh, they can reach out to me at www.healingyouShow.com. And there's a page on there, Contact Me, that you can click, and you can get a free 30-minute introductory session to explore what needs are alive for you and how I might best support you.
Yes, just reach out and just talk to Gloria for 30 minutes. You don't have anything to lose. It's free. And then you might be surprised, and something in your heart might stir like it did for me. And life is never the same. It's better. So thank you so, so much, Gloria, for this beautiful episode. And until next time, bye-bye.